Chapter 10. It must have been around 5 o'clock in the morning when we found Heritage. His arms were practically falling off his body from gunshot wounds, but he was acting like he was just fine. So stoic, so brave, my brother. He knew violence all too well. My mother and I embraced him, trying not to hurt him with our grip. I asked the question I was afraid to hear him answer. Have you seen Dad and Alex? They had been living in the same tent with Heritage. I braced myself for his reply. Yes, he said, they are alive. My heart flooded with relief. I would get to see them, hug them again. Heritage had spotted them amid the chaos and confusion, but had lost them. And so we set out once again, searching the ghostly faces. It was light out when we found them, the sun rising slowly in a pale blue sky, casting a warm glow over the fields of sorrow and grief. I remember thinking, how dare the sun rise? As if it were any other day, after such a gruesome night. People all around us were weeping so loudly it sounded like a choir, a chorus of tears. Oddly, Alex was wearing a sparkly red shirt designed for girls and a too small pair of shorts for girls too. What are you wearing? I asked him. Where did you get those clothes? He explained that he had been sleeping in the nude when the killers attacked his tent and he took off running naked. No time to get dressed, he said. When he reached the farm fields, he said a family from a nearby home brought him the clothes to cover his body. My dad stood by his side, strong and tall. He had holes in the collar of his shirt from bullets. Even his belt strap had bullet holes, but no bullets had brought him down. I stared at the holes in his shirt collar, amazed. We all hugged again and again, holding one another tight. But the reunion felt strangely awkward, too. We did not mention Deborah. I think everyone sensed that she was no longer with us, but no one could bear to say that she was gone. Dad looked like he was trying to hold himself together. Our lives would never be the same. Our Deborah was gone. Our dreams would forever be haunted by her memory. But for now, we had each other. Alex was telling me a rush of stories. A bullet just missed my eye, he said. He described how a woman had been cooking in his tent when the killers came. While trying to escape, she stepped into the pot of scalding hot beans. Confused by the burning pain, she screamed, I've been shot. Alex called out to her, No, you haven't. Take your foot out of those beans. Just one more insane image from our night of hell. Officials from Burundi and the UN were finally arriving now. Buses were coming to bring people to the hospital. Mom refused to go to the hospital despite the gunshot wound in her side. She said she would go later. For the time being, she wanted to stay with our family, and I'm sure she did not want to leave Deborah behind. We all stuck together, tired and broken. I found my cousin Inge. He had survived, but he had lost his mother and 2 little brothers. I don't know how he could handle losing so many family members in one night. I remember feeling that I wasn't entitled to cry because others had lost even more than I had. I learned that my friend Zaraje had been killed. I would never see her face again. My friend Justine survived and I saw her briefly, but we got separated and it would be the last time I ever saw her. 2 of my closest childhood friends gone from my life in a night. Inge and I sat together with his brother Desire that morning beside a fence near a highway, looking out over the eerie scene. For a long time we didn't talk. We just stared in disbelief. Devastated people were scattered across the fields, our friends, neighbors, and relatives, facing unthinkable grief. Mothers were screaming and wailing at the thought of leaving their children's bodies behind. I saw a baby with full body burns. Children were wandering aimlessly, staring blankly, not yet old enough to grasp what had happened. Some had lost both of their parents. I had never seen people look so desperate. Mothers were lifeless. Their entire lives had been taken from them. None of us kids could understand what was going on. I had a sense of shock and confusion, jumbled emotions. We had seen the horror, but we couldn't understand it. We were so young, so confused, that Inge and I did what kids do. We teased Alex about the girl's clothes he was wearing. Nice outfit, I said. I asked my mom if Inge and Desire would live with us now, since they had nowhere to go. But my family had nowhere to live either. We all walked across the charred remains of the camp, wading through a sea of crumpled bodies and limbs. I could not comprehend that you could spend time with people one day and then pick up their body parts the next. We looked for the remains of Deborah, my cousins, and my aunt. We found Deborah near where our tent had been. That's her skull, Mom said. It was the most horrifying scene imaginable. Somehow my mom found the strength to cradle my little sister's burned skull in her arms. We saw the row of people who had been shot dead while running from the tent when the attack began. We found my cousin's body, which had not been burned. I didn't understand death yet. I knew that older people died, and I knew that people could get sick and die, but not kids. I had never thought about how children could die, especially such a violent death. I thought someone would come and say it was all a dream. I wanted to wake up from this nightmare. We saw officials stuffing people's limbs into long white plastic body bags, just picking up different people's limbs and throwing them into the bags. I stared. I didn't cry. It was too much to absorb. You're not supposed to see the limbs of your friends and relatives crammed into plastic bags, all tangled up together because no one knows who the limbs belong to. At the time, we didn't know who had come to kill us. We learned later that a brutal militia group from Burundi had carried out the attack. Forces Nationales de Liberation, led by a man named Agathon Ruwasa. The group claimed responsibility through a spokesperson, Pastor Habamana. Members of other militia groups were reportedly involved in the attack as well, including one called Interahamwe. Of the some 800 refugees in the camp, 166 were reportedly killed and 116 injured. The kids were not brought to justice. The killers were not brought to justice. But we all knew on that morning was that we had nowhere to go. We had no home. We had nothing. Not even the suitcases we had brought with us to the refugee camp. We didn't even have our family photos. Mom's albums had gone up in flames with everything else in the tent. It had been more than 30 hours since I had slept. I don't recall the rest of the day or the night. Everything became a blur. I remember seeing the body bags. I remember thinking, how will we stay alive? And I remember a feeling of disbelief that Deborah had been taken from me. When you lose someone, you're supposed to have time to say goodbye, time to cry, time to mourn. We never got to bury Deborah. I never saw her grave. I didn't even get to see her face after she died. If only I had known that I would never see her again. I would have spent the years learning every curve of her face, studying those long eyelashes, memorizing the way her lips curled into a funny little twist when she was happy. I would have paid more attention. When I think of her infectious smile and those black curls and big dark eyes, I can't help but wonder what my baby sister would look like now. She would be 18 years old today if her life hadn't been cut short. Beauty like that was never meant to last in this cruel world. Sometimes I have a terrifying thought. What if I forget Deborah's face? The years take me further and further from her. I meet people who never knew she existed. I feel as if the older I get, the more I am losing her. As a child, my future always had Deborah in it. The memories haunt me. One second I'm there beside her, falling asleep, and the next, I'm watching her die. I never got to say goodbye.